Mount Rainier has a problem that the National Park Service does not advertise. Since 1984, more than 400 people have vanished on or near this single mountain. 400. Not injuries, not rescues, disappearances. People who walked into the park and never walked out. People whose bodies were never recovered. People who left behind evidence that search teams still cannot explain decades later. 400 missing from one location is not a statistic. It is a pattern. Rainier is not even the largest national park. It is not the most remote. It is not the most technically challenging. Parks with harsher terrain and fewer visitors have a fraction of the disappearances. But something about this mountain takes people at a rate that defies statistical explanation. The Park Service attributes most cases to accidents, falls into crevasses, hypothermia, disorientation in whiteout conditions. These explanations work for some disappearances. They do not work for all of them. They do not explain hikers who vanish from established trails in perfect weather. They do not explain equipment found in locations the missing person could not have reached. They do not explain why search dogs repeatedly refuse to track past certain points on the mountain. They do not explain the witnesses who describe seeing the missing person walking toward something that was not there. Mount Rainier rises 14,411 feet above sea level, dominating the skyline of the Pacific Northwest. On clear days, the mountain is visible from Seattle, nearly 60 miles away. Its glaciated peak appears to float above the horizon, beautiful and permanent and seemingly benign. The mountain is not benign. 25 major glaciers flow down its slopes, containing more ice than all other Cascade volcanoes combined. The glaciers are riddled with crevasses, some hidden beneath thin snow bridges that can collapse without warning. Weather systems crash into the peak with little notice, turning sunny mornings into deadly whiteouts within minutes. The altitude affects judgment. The terrain punishes mistakes. But experienced mountaineers know these dangers. They prepare for them. They respect the mountain and follow established protocols. They still disappear at rates that their experience cannot explain. This video examines 5 disappearances from Mount Rainier. 5 cases where the evidence left behind does not match any conventional explanation. 5 people who entered the park expecting to return and never did. We are not going to tell you what happened to these people. The evidence does not support conclusions. But we are going to show you what was found, what was documented, and what questions remain unanswered. The mountain keeps its secrets. After you watch this video, you will understand why some researchers believe those secrets go beyond accidents and bad luck. Subscribe now. What you are about to hear involves documented evidence from park records, search and rescue reports, and witness statements. These are not urban legends. These events happened on a mountain that millions of people visit every year, believing it is safe. It is not safe, and the reasons may be stranger than anyone wants to admit. We begin with a case from 2017. A 23-year-old woman who came to Mount Rainier for a weekend of hiking and photography. She was experienced. She was prepared. She was in excellent physical condition. She made it 2 miles from the trailhead before something happened that no one has been able to explain. Megan Hartley grew up in Portland, Oregon, close enough to see Mount Rainier on clear days, but far enough that the mountain always felt like a destination rather than a neighbor. She had been visiting Rainier since childhood, first with her parents and later with friends from college. By the summer of 2017, she had hiked most of the major trails in the park and had begun exploring the less traveled routes that offered solitude and challenge. Megan was 23 years old, recently graduated from Oregon State University with a degree in environmental science. She worked for a nonprofit organization focused on watershed restoration and spent most weekends outdoors. Her social media accounts documented her adventures, hiking, trail running, backcountry skiing. She was the kind of person who felt most alive when she was moving through wild places. Her friends described her as confident, athletic, and careful. She did not take unnecessary risks. She always told someone where she was going. She carried the right equipment. She knew her limits. On the weekend of August 12, 2017, Megan drove from Portland to Mount Rainier for a solo overnight trip. She planned to hike the Spray Park Trail, a 7-mile route that climbs through subalpine meadows to views of the mountain's north face. She had done this hike twice before and considered it a moderate challenge. She arrived at the Mowich Lake parking area at approximately 8:30 on Saturday morning. A park volunteer working the entrance station remembered her. He later told investigators that Megan had asked about trail conditions and mentioned she planned to camp at Spray Park that night. She was wearing hiking boots, athletic shorts that fit close to her body, and a light blue tank top. She had a medium-sized pack that appeared properly loaded. She seemed prepared and in good spirits. The volunteer watched her walk toward the trailhead. That was the last confirmed sighting of Megan Hartley. When Megan did not return to work on Monday and did not respond to calls or messages, her roommate contacted the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office. They traced her vehicle to the Mowich Lake parking area, where it sat undisturbed, covered with 2 days of dust and pollen. A search began immediately. The Spray Park Trail is well maintained and heavily traveled during summer months. Rangers hiked the entire route on Monday afternoon, checking campsites and asking other hikers if they had seen a woman matching Megan's description. Several people reported seeing her on Saturday morning, walking north on the trail. The sightings placed her at various points during the first 2 miles of the hike. The last confirmed sighting came from a couple from Tacoma who had passed Megan at approximately 10:15 on Saturday morning. They were descending as she was ascending, approximately 1.8 miles from the trailhead. They remembered her because she had stepped off the trail to let them pass and had smiled and said good morning. She appeared healthy, happy, and unhurried. No one reported seeing her after that point. The search expanded rapidly. By Tuesday morning, more than 40 personnel were involved, including park rangers, Pierce County Search and Rescue, and volunteer teams from across the region. Dogs were brought in. Helicopters flew patterns over the trail and surrounding terrain. On Tuesday afternoon, a search team found Megan's backpack. It was sitting beside the trail, approximately 2.3 miles from the trailhead, roughly half a mile past where she had last been seen. The pack was upright, leaning against a rock, positioned as if someone had set it down to rest, and never picked it up. Inside the pack, searchers found Megan's tent, sleeping bag, food, water filter, extra clothing, and first aid kit. Her camera was inside, containing photographs from the morning hike. The final image was time-stamped at 10:47, showing a view of the meadows ahead. Everything appeared normal. Her water bottles were full. Her food was untouched. Her rain jacket was packed on top, easily accessible. Megan's phone was not in the pack. Her car keys were not in the pack. She had apparently taken only these 2 items when she walked away from her supplies. The location where the pack was found was unremarkable. The trail at that point runs through open subalpine meadow with good visibility in all directions. There are no cliffs, no water hazards, no obvious dangers. The terrain is relatively flat. A person standing at the pack location can see for hundreds of yards in every direction. Dogs tracked Megan's scent from the pack approximately 200 meters further up the trail. Then they stopped. The lead dog, a German shepherd named Atlas, who had worked more than 150 searches in the Cascades, tracked to a specific point on the trail and refused to continue. He circled the area, sniffed the ground, then sat and looked at his handler. The handler tried to encourage him forward. Atlas would not move. A second dog was brought to the same location. She tracked to within 10 feet of where Atlas had stopped and exhibited identical behavior: circling, sitting, refusing to continue. The handlers had extensive experience with tracking dogs. They knew what it meant when a trail ended at water, at a road, at a location where someone had entered a vehicle. This was different. The trail simply ended in the middle of an open meadow. There was no obstacle, no transition, just empty trail continuing in both directions. The search continued for 9 days. Teams covered every square meter of terrain within a 3-mile radius of where Megan's pack was found. They checked the glacier moraines to the east. They searched the forested valleys to the west. They examined every crevasse, every boulder field, every possible location where a person might have fallen or become trapped. Megan Hartley was not found. The investigation considered multiple scenarios. Had she encountered a medical emergency? Megan was young, healthy, and had no known conditions. Her pace on the trail, based on the timestamps of her photographs, suggested she was moving normally without distress. Had she encountered wildlife? Bears are present in the park, but attacks are rare and typically leave evidence. There was no sign of struggle, no blood, no disturbed vegetation. Had she become disoriented and wandered off trail? The terrain where her pack was found offers excellent visibility. Getting lost at that specific location would be difficult for any hiker, let alone one as experienced as Megan. Had she met with foul play? No other people were seen in the area at the relevant time. There were no reports of suspicious individuals. Megan's pack and its contents showed no signs of interference. What puzzled investigators most was the decision to leave the pack behind. Megan was an experienced hiker. She knew the importance of staying with her equipment. She knew that a pack contains everything needed for survival. Why would she walk away from it carrying only her phone and keys? And why did her trail end so completely in the middle of an open meadow? A volunteer searcher named Rick Delgado, who participated in the operation for 6 of the 9 days, later described his experience on a hiking forum. He wrote that on the 4th day of the search, he was assigned to cover a section of meadow approximately half a mile from where Megan's pack was found. The area had already been searched twice, but teams were making additional passes. Rick wrote that at approximately 2 in the afternoon, he heard something, a sound like a woman's voice coming from somewhere ahead. He could not make out words, just the pitch and rhythm of speech. He called out. The sound stopped. He moved toward where he thought it had originated and found nothing. Empty meadow. No person. No explanation for what he had heard. He reported the incident to the search coordinator. Other teams were directed to the area. Nothing was found. Rick later learned that 2 other searchers had reported similar experiences during the operation. Brief sounds, like distant voices, that seemed to come from empty terrain. None of them could explain what they had heard. Megan Hartley has been missing for 8 years. Her case remains officially open. Her body has never been recovered. Her parents still live in Portland. Every summer they drive to Mount Rainier and hike the Spray Park Trail to the location where their daughter's pack was found. They stand in the meadow and look at the mountain rising above them. They do not know what happened to Megan. They do not know why she left her pack behind. They do not know where she went. They know only that their daughter walked into these meadows on a sunny August morning and never came back. They know that her trail ended in the middle of open ground. They know that despite 9 days of searching by more than 100 personnel, no trace of her was ever found beyond that abandoned pack. What did Megan Hartley see that made her leave her equipment behind? Where was she going when she walked away from the trail? What happened in that meadow on August 12, 2017? We do not know. If you want to understand why Mount Rainier has the highest concentration of unexplained disappearances of any national park in America, keep watching. The cases we examine next reveal patterns that cannot be ignored. The second case takes us to the mountain's east side, where an experienced climber vanished during an ascent he had completed more than a dozen times before. What happened to him challenges everything his fellow climbers thought they knew about the route. The Emmons Glacier on Mount Rainier's east face is the largest glacier in the contiguous United States, covering more than 4 square miles of the mountain's upper slopes. It is also one of the most popular routes to the summit, attracting hundreds of climbers each summer who attempt the 11-mile round trip from the White River Campground to the 14,000-foot peak. The route is not technically difficult by mountaineering standards. It does not require rock climbing or extreme ice work, but it is long, steep, and exhausting. Climbers typically begin their summit attempt at midnight or 1 in the morning, ascending through the darkness to reach the top before afternoon heat destabilizes the snowpack. The climb takes most parties between 8 and 12 hours. The primary dangers on the Emmons route are crevasses and weather. The glacier is fractured by hundreds of cracks in the ice, some visible and some hidden beneath snow. Climbers travel roped together so that if one person falls into a crevasse, their partners can arrest the fall and attempt rescue. Weather on the upper mountain can change rapidly, with clear conditions deteriorating to whiteout in minutes. Experienced climbers respect these dangers but do not fear them. The Emmons route has been climbed thousands of times. With proper preparation, proper equipment, and proper judgment, the risks are manageable. David Okonkwo was one of the most experienced Emmons climbers in the Pacific Northwest. David was 41 years old in June of 2015. He worked as a physical therapist in Seattle and had been climbing in the Cascades for more than 20 years. He had summited Rainier 14 times via 5 different routes. He had guided novice climbers up the mountain. He had participated in search and rescue operations on the glacier. He knew the Emmons route as well as anyone alive. His climbing partners described him as methodical, conservative, and safety-focused. He never pushed when conditions were bad. He never took shortcuts on equipment or preparation. He was the kind of climber that other climbers wanted on their rope because he made decisions that kept people alive. On June 14, 2015, David attempted a solo climb of the Emmons route. Solo climbing is more dangerous than climbing with partners because there is no one to help if something goes wrong. But experienced climbers sometimes choose to go alone, accepting the additional risk in exchange for the freedom of moving at their own pace. David had climbed Rainier solo 3 times before without incident. He knew the route. He knew his capabilities. He filed a climbing permit with the Park Service indicating his planned route and expected return date. He left the White River campground at approximately midnight on June 14th. The weather forecast was favorable. Clear skies, light winds, cold temperatures that would keep the snow firm. Perfect conditions for a summit attempt. At approximately 4:30 in the morning, David was seen by another climbing party at around 11,000 feet on the glacier. The party, consisting of 3 climbers from Portland, recognized David from previous encounters on the mountain. They exchanged brief greetings. David appeared to be moving well, on pace for a normal summit time. He was wearing a red jacket and carrying a blue pack. That was the last time anyone saw David Okonkwo. When David did not return to his vehicle by his indicated date of June 15th, park rangers initiated a search. The weather remained clear, allowing helicopters to fly the route looking for any sign of the missing climber. On June 16th, a helicopter spotted something on the glacier at approximately 12,800 feet. A blue backpack, sitting on the ice near a major crevasse field. Ground teams reached the pack later that day. It was David's. Inside were his extra clothing, food, water, emergency equipment, and summit camera. The pack was closed, positioned upright on the ice as if carefully placed rather than dropped. David's climbing rope was coiled and attached to the outside of the pack. He had apparently removed it and left it behind. The crevasse field near the pack was searched extensively. Rescuers probed the snow bridges. They lowered team members into the largest crevasses to check for any sign of a fallen climber. They found nothing. David's ice axe was found approximately 50 meters higher on the glacier, lying on the snow. His crampons were found near the axe, unbuckled as if removed deliberately. The evidence suggested that David had stopped at this location, removed his pack, his rope, his crampons, and his ice axe, and had continued climbing without any of his essential equipment. This made no sense. No experienced climber would remove their crampons on a glacier. The metal spikes attached to boots are essential for traction on ice. Without them, climbing is nearly impossible, and descending is suicidal. David had 20 years of experience. He knew this. No experienced climber would remove their ice axe. The axe is the primary tool for self-arrest if a climber slips. It is also used for balance, for probing snow bridges, for anchoring ropes. Climbing without an ice axe is like driving without a steering wheel. David would never have done it voluntarily. No experienced climber would unrope solo on a crevassed glacier. The rope, while useless without partners to hold it, can still be used to self-rescue from a shallow crevasse. Removing it eliminates even that option. David had deliberately abandoned every piece of equipment that kept him alive on the glacier. Then he had continued climbing toward the summit, wearing only boots without crampons, carrying nothing. The search continued for 11 days. Teams covered the route from where David's equipment was found all the way to the summit. They checked every crevasse. They searched the surrounding glaciers in case David had become disoriented and wandered off route. They flew helicopters with thermal imaging equipment. David Okonkwo was never found. The climbing community was stunned. David was not the kind of person who made fatal errors. He did not take unnecessary risks. He did not ignore basic safety protocols. Yet the evidence showed him abandoning his equipment at 12,800 feet and continuing upward into terrain, where survival without that equipment would be measured in minutes. Several climbers who knew David offered theories. Perhaps he had experienced a sudden medical event, a stroke or heart attack that affected his judgment. But medical events typically leave the victim incapacitated, not continuing to climb. And there was no body, no sign of collapse anywhere on the route. Perhaps he had been affected by altitude sickness, which can cause confusion and poor decision-making. But David had climbed higher than 12,000 feet many times. He knew the symptoms. He was accustomed to the altitude. Perhaps something had frightened him, causing him to flee and leave his equipment behind. But flee toward the summit? Uphill, into more dangerous terrain? It made no sense. One climber who participated in the search, a man named Carlos Gutierrez, who had known David for more than 10 years, later wrote about his experience. He described reaching the location where David's pack was found and feeling immediately that something was wrong. Carlos wrote that the glacier at that spot felt different. Not dangerous exactly, just wrong. He could not explain it better than that. The ice was normal, the weather was clear. But standing there, looking up the route where David had apparently continued, Carlos felt a powerful urge to turn around and descend. He did not turn around. He continued searching for 3 more days. But he never forgot that feeling. David Okonkwo has been missing for 10 years. His case remains officially open. His body has never been recovered. His wife, Michelle, has kept his climbing equipment exactly as he left it in their garage. His ropes, his ice tools, his tent. She does not believe her husband simply made a fatal mistake after 20 years of safe climbing. She believes something happened on that glacier that cannot be explained by accident or poor judgment. She does not know what that something was. She only knows that David walked away from everything that kept him alive and continued toward a summit he never reached. Why did David Okonkwo remove his crampons, his ice axe, and his rope? What made him continue climbing without essential safety equipment? What was he moving toward? Where is David now? We do not know. The patterns in these cases are becoming clearer. Equipment abandoned deliberately. Trails that end inexplicably. Experienced people making decisions that contradict everything they knew about survival. Mount Rainier has seen this pattern repeat for decades. The mountain takes people who should have survived. It leaves behind evidence that does not make sense, and it never gives them back. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on these cases. What do you think happened to Megan Hartley in that meadow? Why did David Okonkwo remove his safety equipment? We have 3 more cases to cover. The next one involves something that none of the others have had. Multiple witnesses who watched a climber walk toward something they could not see. Something that appeared on photographs, but not to the naked eye. Subscribe now if you have not already. Turn on notifications. Mount Rainier is not finished revealing its secrets. The third case occurred in September of 2011, during the final weeks of the climbing season, when the mountain sees fewer visitors but remains accessible to experienced parties. The events of that week would leave witnesses with questions they still cannot answer. Jonathan Mercer was 35 years old, a software engineer from San Francisco who had discovered mountaineering in his late 20s and had pursued it with the intensity that characterized everything he did. In 6 years of climbing, he had summited peaks throughout the western United States, including Denali in Alaska, the highest mountain in North America. Rainier was familiar territory. He had climbed it 4 times. Jonathan was attempting the mountain with 2 friends, both experienced climbers. The group planned to take the Disappointment Cleaver route, the most popular path to the summit. They began their climb from Camp Muir at 11,000 feet on September 8th at approximately 1 in the morning. The weather was clear, but cold. The climbing conditions were good. The group moved steadily through the darkness, headlamps illuminating the snow ahead. At approximately 4:30 in the morning, at an elevation of around 12,500 feet, the group stopped to rest and eat. The eastern horizon was beginning to lighten with the approach of dawn. Jonathan mentioned that he wanted to take some photographs of the pre-dawn light on the glacier. He unroped from his partners and walked approximately 40 meters to the east toward a vantage point that offered a clear view of the rising light. His partners could see him clearly. He was silhouetted against the lightening sky, standing on a gentle snow slope with no obvious hazards. Jonathan raised his camera and took several photographs. His partners watched him, waiting for him to return so they could continue the climb. Then Jonathan lowered his camera and stood motionless. He appeared to be looking at something further to the east, down the glacier. One of his partners, a man named Kevin Chow, called out to ask if everything was okay. Jonathan did not respond. He continued staring to the east. Kevin stood up and began walking toward Jonathan. As he did, Jonathan raised his hand, as if gesturing to someone. Then he began walking. Not toward his partners, not toward the climbing route. He walked east, down the glacier, toward whatever he had been looking at. Kevin shouted for Jonathan to stop. The third climber, a woman named Rachel Torres, also shouted. Jonathan did not respond. He continued walking, his pace steady, his direction unwavering. Kevin began moving faster, trying to catch Jonathan. But Kevin was still roped to Rachel, which slowed his movement. By the time he could pursue effectively, Jonathan had descended approximately 100 meters down the glacier. Kevin shouted again. Jonathan stopped. He turned around. Kevin could see his face in the growing light. He described Jonathan's expression as calm, almost peaceful, not confused or frightened, just calm. Jonathan raised his hand again, as if waving goodbye. Then he turned and continued walking down the glacier. Within minutes, he had disappeared into a depression in the ice that blocked him from view. Kevin and Rachel debated what to do. Following Jonathan down the glacier would mean abandoning their climb and potentially putting themselves in danger. They decided to descend to Camp Muir and report the incident, hoping that Jonathan would realize his mistake and return to the route. Jonathan did not return. A search began later that morning. Teams descended the glacier in the direction Jonathan had traveled. They found his footprints in the snow, leading steadily down and to the east. The prints continued for approximately 400 meters, then ended at the edge of a crevasse field. The crevasses were searched. Rescue teams probed the snow. Climbers descended into the larger openings. Jonathan was not found. His camera was found 2 days later, lying on the ice approximately 50 meters from where his footprints ended. The camera was undamaged. The memory card contained photographs from the climb. Investigators examined the images carefully. The final photographs were time-stamped at the time when Kevin and Rachel had seen Jonathan taking pictures of the dawn light. The images showed the glacier, the distant peaks, the first rays of sunlight touching the ice. In the second-to-last photograph, there was something else. The image showed the glacier to the east, the direction Jonathan had been looking when he stopped responding to his partners. The snow and ice appeared normal. The lighting was dim, but visible. And at the edge of the frame, approximately 200 meters from where Jonathan was standing, there appeared to be a figure. The figure was indistinct, more of a shape than a clear form. It was darker than the surrounding snow. It appeared to be standing upright, roughly human in proportion. It was visible only in this single photograph. The images taken immediately before and after showed the same view without the figure. Kevin and Rachel had been watching Jonathan when he took this photograph. They did not see anyone on the glacier. They did not see any figure in the direction Jonathan was looking. There were no other climbing parties in that area, but the camera recorded something. Image analysts examined the photograph extensively. Some concluded that the figure was a trick of light, a shadow cast by an irregularity in the terrain. Others noted that the shape was too defined, too symmetrical to be a natural shadow. The analysis was inconclusive. What was not inconclusive was Jonathan's behavior. He had seen something that made him abandon his partners, unrope on a glacier, and walk directly toward a crevasse field. He had not responded to shouts. He had not shown signs of confusion or distress. He had walked with purpose toward something that his partners could not see. Jonathan Mercer has been missing for 14 years. His body has never been recovered. The crevasse field where his footprints ended has been searched repeatedly as glacial movement has shifted the ice. Nothing has been found. His camera remains with his family in San Francisco. They have looked at the photograph with the figure thousands of times. They have shown it to experts, to researchers, to anyone who might help explain what their son and brother saw that morning. No one has been able to explain it. Kevin Chow still climbs, though he has never returned to Mount Rainier. He has described the morning of September 8, 2011, in detail to investigators, to journalists, to other climbers. His account has never changed. He saw his friend walk away from everything that mattered. He saw him raise his hand as if greeting someone. He saw him disappear into the glacier without ever looking back. He does not know what Jonathan saw. He does not know why his friend walked toward it. He only knows that something was out there on the ice that morning, something that appeared on film, but not to the human eye. Something that drew Jonathan Mercer away from his partners and his life. What was the figure in Jonathan's photograph? Why did he walk toward it without responding to his friends? What did he see that they could not? Where is Jonathan now? We do not know. 3 cases. 3 experienced outdoors people who abandoned their equipment and walked away from safety. 3 sets of evidence that do not fit any conventional explanation. Mount Rainier has accumulated more than 400 such cases over the past 4 decades. The mountain takes people who should have survived. It leaves behind evidence that raises more questions than it answers. And the patterns repeat, year after year, decade after decade. In Part 2, we will examine 2 more cases from the mountain. One involves a father and daughter who vanished together, leaving behind a tent that was still standing, but completely empty. The other involves a park ranger who disappeared while investigating a previous disappearance, becoming part of the mystery he was trying to solve. We will also begin examining the theories that have been proposed to explain Rainier's extraordinary disappearance rate. Some of these theories are conventional. Some venture into territory that challenges our understanding of what is possible. Subscribe now so you do not miss Part 2. Turn on notifications. And if you have hiked Mount Rainier, if you have experienced something on the mountain that you cannot explain, tell us about it in the comments. The more accounts we gather, the clearer the patterns become. Mount Rainier is waiting. The mountain has been taking people for as long as records have been kept. It shows no signs of stopping. What is happening on that glacier? Why does this mountain claim more lives than any comparable peak? What are people walking toward when they abandon their equipment and disappear? Part 2 is coming. The answers remain hidden somewhere on that mountain, but the questions keep getting louder. Welcome back. If you have not seen Part 1, stop now and go watch it. These cases build on each other, and you need to understand what Mount Rainier has been doing to people before we continue. In Part 1, we examined 3 disappearances from the mountain that dominates the Pacific Northwest skyline. Megan Hartley, a 23-year-old hiker who left her pack beside the trail and walked into a meadow where her scent trail simply ended. David Okonkwo, an experienced climber who removed his crampons, ice axe, and rope at 12,000 feet and continued toward the summit with nothing that could keep him alive. Jonathan Mercer, who walked away from his climbing partners toward something they could not see, something that appeared in his photographs as a figure on the glacier. 3 experienced people. 3 sets of equipment left behind. 3 trails that ended without explanation. Mount Rainier has accumulated more than 400 such cases since 1984. The cases we covered in Part 1 are not anomalies. They are examples of a pattern that has repeated on this mountain for decades. The cases we will examine now add new dimensions to that pattern. One involves a father and daughter who entered the backcountry together and vanished from their tent without leaving a single footprint in the fresh snow that surrounded it. The other involves a park ranger who disappeared while investigating a previous disappearance, becoming part of the very mystery he was trying to solve. After these cases, you will understand why some researchers have stopped looking for conventional explanations. The evidence does not support them. Let us continue. The backcountry of Mount Rainier extends far beyond the popular trails and climbing routes that most visitors experience. More than 97% of the park is designated wilderness, accessible only on foot or by technical climbing. Much of this terrain sees fewer than a dozen visitors per year. Some areas have never been thoroughly explored. The wilderness permit system requires backcountry campers to register their intended routes and campsites. Rangers use this information to manage visitor impact and to know where to search if someone does not return. The system works well most of the time. Overdue hikers are located. Lost parties are found. The backcountry, while challenging, is not inherently more dangerous than the front country. But the backcountry is where Mount Rainier's strangest disappearances tend to occur. Away from the crowds, away from the established routes, something happens to people that does not happen in the more traveled areas. The case of Daniel and Emily Yoshida is one of the most disturbing in the park's history. Daniel Yoshida was 47 years old in July of 2013. He worked as an architect in Bellevue, Washington, and had been hiking and backpacking in the Cascades for more than 25 years. He was not a technical climber, but he was an experienced wilderness traveler who understood weather, navigation, and the particular challenges of the Pacific Northwest mountains. His daughter Emily was 19, home for the summer after her freshman year at the University of Washington. She had grown up hiking with her father and shared his love of wild places. Their annual backpacking trip had become a tradition, a way of maintaining their connection as she grew older and their lives grew busier. In July of 2013, they planned a 4-day trip into the park's remote northwest corner. The route would take them through old-growth forest, across alpine meadows, and to a seldom-visited lake that Daniel had discovered on a solo trip years earlier. He had always wanted to share the place with Emily. They entered the backcountry on July 15th, registering for campsites at Ipsut Creek, Mystic Lake, and the unnamed lake that was their ultimate destination. The ranger who processed their permit remembered them clearly. A father and daughter, obviously close, excited about their adventure. Daniel had asked detailed questions about trail conditions and water sources. Emily had mentioned she was bringing a new camera and hoped to photograph wildlife. The first 2 days of their trip proceeded as planned. Another hiking party encountered them on July 16th near Mystic Lake. The other hikers, a couple from Portland, chatted with Daniel and Emily for about 10 minutes. They discussed trail conditions, wildlife sightings, and the weather forecast. Daniel mentioned they were heading to a lake that did not appear on most maps. He seemed excited to show it to Emily. The Portland couple continued south, while Daniel and Emily continued north. That was the last time anyone saw them. When Daniel and Emily did not return to their vehicle on July 19th as scheduled, Daniel's wife, Rebecca, contacted the park service. Rangers hiked to the registered campsites along the Yoshidas' planned route. The first 2 campsites showed signs of use consistent with the dates Daniel and Emily would have been there. Fire rings contained recent ash. The ground showed where tents had been pitched. Everything appeared normal. The third campsite, at the unnamed lake, presented a different picture. Rangers reached the lake on July 21st after a difficult cross-country approach. The lake sat in a glacial cirque at approximately 6,000 feet, surrounded by steep walls on 3 sides. A waterfall fed the lake from above. The setting was spectacular and completely isolated. Daniel and Emily's tent was still standing. It was pitched on a flat area near the lake shore, approximately 50 feet from the water. The tent was properly erected, guy lines taut, rain fly in place. From a distance, it appeared the Yoshidas might still be inside, perhaps sleeping late or waiting out weather. They were not inside. The tent was empty. Both sleeping bags were present, unrolled, and apparently slept in. Both sleeping pads were inflated. Emily's book was open beside her sleeping bag. Daniel's reading glasses were folded on top of his. Their packs were inside the tent, fully loaded with remaining food and equipment. Their stove was outside, positioned for cooking, with a pot containing water that had long since evaporated. Their water filter was set up beside the lake. Their boots were inside the tent. Daniel's on the left side, Emily's on the right. Neatly paired, laces loosened as if removed before sleep. Their clothing was present, their jackets, their rain gear, their warm layers. Everything they had carried into the backcountry remained at the campsite. Daniel and Emily had apparently left their tent in the middle of the night, wearing nothing but whatever they had slept in. No boots, no jackets, no equipment. And here is what made the case impossible to explain. It had snowed. On the night of July 17th, an unseasonable cold front had pushed through the region. At higher elevations, temperatures dropped below freezing. The unnamed lake received approximately 3 inches of fresh snow, covering the ground around the tent in an unbroken white blanket. Rangers examined the snow carefully. There were no footprints leading away from the tent. The snow was undisturbed. A perfect layer of white extended from the tent in all directions. If Daniel and Emily had walked out of that tent at any point after the snow began falling, they would have left tracks. They did not leave tracks. The tent had clearly been occupied after the snow began. The occupant's body heat had partially melted the snow on the tent fly, and the pattern of melting indicated warmth inside the tent, during and after the snowfall. Someone had been inside that tent while it was snowing, but when they left, they did not walk through the snow that surrounded it. Search teams expanded their efforts across the cirque. They checked the lake shore, the waterfall, the steep walls surrounding the basin. They looked for any sign of the Yoshidas, any indication of where they had gone. They found nothing. The search continued for 14 days. More than 200 personnel participated, including park rangers, county search and rescue teams, military helicopters, and volunteer organizations from across the region. The terrain made searching difficult. The cirque was remote, accessible only by a grueling cross-country approach. Weather windows were limited. The unnamed lake and its surroundings were searched exhaustively. Every boulder, every crevice, every possible location where 2 people might have gone. The lake itself was checked by divers, though the cold and depth limited their search time. Daniel and Emily Yoshida were not found. The investigation could not explain the evidence. 2 people had been inside that tent when it was snowing. 2 people had left that tent at some point. 2 people had not left footprints in the fresh snow. Some investigators suggested that perhaps the Yoshidas had left before the snow began, and the estimated timeline was wrong. But the pattern of melting on the tent indicated body heat after the snowfall. And even if they had left before the snow, where were their footprints in the dirt and vegetation? There were none. The ground around the tent showed no signs of passage in any direction. Others suggested that perhaps someone had come and taken the Yoshidas. But who? The location was impossibly remote. No other permits had been issued for that area. No other hikers reported being anywhere near the unnamed to stand where her husband and daughter were last known to exist. She has found no answers. She knows only that Daniel and Emily went into the backcountry for a trip they had been planning for months. She knows they reached the lake and set up camp. She knows they were inside their tent when it snowed. And she knows they disappeared from that tent without leaving any trace of how they left. Her daughter's camera was in the tent, containing photographs from the first 3 days of the trip. The final images showed Daniel and Emily at the lake shore, smiling, the spectacular scenery behind them. They looked happy. They looked like they were exactly where they wanted to be. Those are the last images Rebecca has of her family. Daniel and Emily Yoshida have been missing for 12 years. Their case remains officially open. Their bodies have never been recovered. The tent they left behind was eventually recovered by rangers and returned to Rebecca. She keeps it in her garage, still bearing the stains of that July snowfall. She cannot bring herself to use it or give it away. What happened at that lake on the night of July 17th, 2013? How did Daniel and Emily leave their tent without walking through the snow? Where did a father and daughter go in the middle of the night, wearing nothing but sleep clothes, leaving everything behind? We do not know. If you are finding these cases as disturbing as we believe you should, subscribe now and turn on notifications. The final case in this section involves something that has never happened before or since on Mount Rainier. A park ranger who vanished while investigating a previous disappearance. The men and women who serve as park rangers at Mount Rainier are among the most skilled wilderness professionals in the country. They are trained in search and rescue, emergency medicine, mountaineering, and backcountry navigation. Many have military or law enforcement backgrounds. They are the people who rescue hikers, recover bodies, and investigate the incidents that occur within the park's boundaries. Rangers do not disappear. They know the terrain too well. They follow protocols that have been refined over decades. They carry equipment that allows them to communicate from almost anywhere in the park. They work in teams or maintain regular contact when operating solo. In the 70-plus year history of Mount Rainier National Park, only one ranger has ever vanished without a trace. His name was Marcus Webb. Marcus was 38 years old in October of 2016. He had worked at Rainier for 9 years, progressing from seasonal interpretive ranger to permanent wilderness ranger. He was responsible for patrolling the park's backcountry, maintaining trails, monitoring wildlife, and responding to emergencies. He was also part of the team that investigated unusual incidents. Marcus had participated in dozens of search and rescue operations. He had helped recover bodies from crevasses. He had found lost hikers, stranded climbers, and people who had made mistakes that cost them their lives. He knew what happened to people who got into trouble on the mountain. He knew how to avoid becoming one of them. In October of 2016, Marcus was assigned to investigate a disappearance that had occurred 3 weeks earlier. A solo hiker named Stephen Park had vanished from a trail in the park's remote Carbon River area. The initial search had found Stephen's pack beside the trail, but no sign of Stephen himself. The search had been suspended after 8 days due to deteriorating weather. Marcus was tasked with conducting a follow-up investigation. He would return to where Stephen's pack had been found and look for any evidence that the initial search might have missed. He would also interview other hikers who had been in the area around the time of the disappearance. On October 14th, Marcus drove to the Carbon River entrance and hiked approximately 4 miles to the area where Stephen had disappeared. He was in regular radio contact with the ranger station, checking in every 2 hours, as required by protocol. His 11 o'clock check-in was normal. He reported that he had reached the site where Stephen's pack was found and was beginning his investigation. Weather was clear. He expected to complete his work by mid-afternoon and return to the trailhead before dark. His 1 o'clock check-in was normal. He reported that he had found some items that the initial search had missed. A water bottle approximately 50 meters from where the pack was found. A single hiking boot approximately 100 meters beyond that, off the main trail. He was following what appeared to be a faint trail of evidence leading into the forest. His 3 o'clock check-in did not occur. The ranger station tried to reach Marcus by radio. No response. They tried his cell phone. No signal. They waited 30 minutes and tried again. Nothing. At 4 o'clock, 2 rangers departed from the Carbon River station to check on Marcus. They hiked the trail at a rapid pace, reaching the area of Stephen Park's disappearance by 5:30. They found the items Marcus had reported: the water bottle, the single boot. They found Marcus's pack sitting beside the trail near the boot, positioned upright as if carefully placed. Marcus was not there. The search that followed was unlike any other in park history. Rangers were searching for one of their own. The urgency was personal. The resources deployed were extraordinary. Within 24 hours, more than 80 personnel were combing the Carbon River area. Helicopters flew continuous patterns when visibility allowed. Dogs were brought in from 3 counties. The search extended for miles in every direction from where Marcus's pack was found. On the second day of the search, a dog team made a discovery that would become the central mystery of the investigation. Approximately 1.2 miles from where Marcus's pack was found, in dense forest well off any established trail, the dogs located a piece of paper. It was a page torn from a small notebook, the kind that rangers carried for taking notes in the field. The handwriting on the page was Marcus's. The note read as follows: "Found more items. Boot, sock. Heading northwest. Trail is clear now. Someone has been through here recently. I can see where they walked. Following." The note was time-stamped at the top, 2:17 p.m., approximately 45 minutes before Marcus's missed check-in. The note indicated that Marcus had found evidence of someone passing through the forest. He was following their trail. He believed the trail was fresh enough to indicate recent passage, but searchers could find no trail. The forest floor showed no signs of passage by Marcus or anyone else. The dogs could not pick up a consistent scent track leading from where Marcus's pack was found to where the note was discovered. The note had been found lying on the ground beside a fallen log, as if dropped or set down. More disturbing was the direction Marcus indicated he was heading. Northwest from where his pack was found would take him deeper into the forest, away from any trail, toward terrain that became increasingly rugged and remote. There was no reason for Stephen Park to have gone that direction. There was no destination there. just miles of trackless wilderness leading eventually to cliffs and glacial moraines. Yet Marcus had written that the trail was clear, that he could see where someone had walked, that he was following. The search continued for 12 days. Teams covered every accessible area within a 5-mile radius of Marcus's last known position. The terrain was difficult, the weather uncooperative, and the daylight limited by the October calendar. But rangers pushed harder than they had ever pushed for any search. They found one more item. On the 8th day, a volunteer searcher discovered Marcus's radio. It was sitting on a rock in the middle of a small stream, approximately 2.3 miles from where his pack was found. The radio was wet, but functional when dried. The battery was dead. When technicians examined the radio, they found that it had been transmitting at 3:11 p.m. on October 14th, approximately an hour after Marcus's last check-in and 40 minutes after the timestamp on his note. The transmission lasted 11 seconds. The audio captured by the repeater system was mostly static, but voice analysis detected what appeared to be words. The analysts disagreed on what the words were. Some heard something that sounded like, "I can see him." Others heard, "I can see it." A few thought the words were, "I can't see." The quality was too poor for definitive analysis. But Marcus had transmitted something an hour after he went silent. Something he apparently said while walking through the forest, following a trail that no one else could find. Then his radio ended up in a stream 2 miles away, and Marcus Webb was never seen again. The ranger community was devastated. They had lost one of their own while he was doing the job they all did. The job they had been trained for. The job they believed they could do safely if they followed the right protocols. Marcus had followed every protocol. He had checked in regularly. He had carried all required equipment. He had communicated his intentions. He had done everything right. He still vanished. His wife, Janet, has spent years seeking answers that do not exist. She has read every report, examined every piece of evidence, interviewed everyone who participated in the search. She has walked the Carbon River Trail herself, standing where her husband's pack was found, looking into the forest where he apparently walked. She does not understand what Marcus saw that day. She does not understand what trail he was following when no one else could find any trace of passage. She does not understand how he ended up 2 miles from his pack in terrain that would take hours to traverse, apparently transmitting something about seeing someone or something. She knows only that Marcus went into the forest to investigate a disappearance and became a disappearance himself. The investigator became the case. The rescuer became the lost. There is one more detail that Janet thinks about often. Marcus was investigating Stephen Park's disappearance. Stephen had also vanished from the Carbon River area, his pack found beside the trail, no sign of where he had gone. When Marcus disappeared, he left his pack beside the trail, in almost exactly the same manner. He apparently walked into the same forest. He apparently followed something, or someone, that he believed was real. Was Marcus following Stephen's trail? After 3 weeks, was there still evidence of Stephen's passage that Marcus could see, but no one else could find? Did Marcus see something in the forest that led him to walk away from his equipment, his radio, his protocols, or was it something else entirely? The Carbon River area of Mount Rainier has been closed to overnight camping since 2017. The official reason is environmental protection, allowing the ecosystem to recover from heavy use. Some people believe there are other reasons. The area had 3 disappearances in the 5 years before the closure. Stephen Park, Marcus Webb, and another hiker whose case was never publicized, a solo traveler from California who was never reported missing because no one knew he was there until his car was found at the trailhead months later. 3 people vanished from the same remote section of the park. One of them was a trained ranger following protocols designed specifically to prevent disappearances. None of them were ever found. Marcus Webb has been missing for 9 years. His case remains officially open. His body has never been recovered. His radio sits in an evidence locker at park headquarters. The 11 seconds of audio have been analyzed repeatedly. The words remain unclear. The message, whatever it was, has never been deciphered. What did Marcus Webb find in the Carbon River forest? What trail was he following when no one else could see any evidence of passage? What did he transmit in those final 11 seconds? Did he find Stephen Park? Or did he find something else? Where is Marcus now? We do not know. We have now examined 5 disappearances from Mount Rainier. 5 people who entered the park and never returned. 5 sets of evidence that do not fit any conventional explanation. A young woman who left her pack and walked into a meadow where her trail simply ended. A climber who removed his safety equipment and continued toward the summit with nothing that could keep him alive. A man who walked away from his partners toward a figure that appeared on film, but not to the human eye. A father and daughter who vanished from their tent without leaving footprints in the surrounding snow. A ranger who disappeared while investigating a previous disappearance, becoming part of the mystery he was trying to solve. These are not isolated incidents. These are examples of a pattern that has repeated on Mount Rainier for decades. More than 400 people have disappeared from this single mountain since 1984. The rate of disappearance is higher here than at any comparable peak in North America. Why? The conventional explanations do not work. Yes, the mountain has crevasses. Yes, the weather can be deadly. Yes, the terrain is challenging. But other mountains have all of these hazards and do not accumulate disappearances at anything close to Rainier's rate. Something else is happening here. Something that the evidence suggests, but does not explain. In Part 3, we will examine the final case from Mount Rainier, and then step back to consider what all of this evidence means. We will look at the theories that have been proposed. We will examine the patterns that connect these disappearances across years and decades. We will ask questions that may not have answers. We will also reveal something that the Park Service does not publicize. A document that was obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request. A document that shows the Park Service has been tracking these unusual disappearances for years and has been unable to explain them. Subscribe now if you have not already. Turn on notifications so you do not miss Part 3. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on these cases. What do you think happened to Daniel and Emily Yoshida in that tent? What trail was Marcus Webb following when he walked into the forest? We read every comment. Some of you have visited Mount Rainier. Some of you have experienced things there that you have never told anyone about. This might be the place to share them. Part 3 is coming. The final case, the final questions, and a revelation that will change how you think about this mountain. Mount Rainier is the most visited peak in the Cascades. Every year, more than 2 million people enter the park. They hike the trails, they climb the glaciers, they photograph the views. Most of them return home safely, but some do not. And the evidence they leave behind suggests something is happening on that mountain that we do not understand. What is taking people on Mount Rainier? Why does this mountain claim more victims than any comparable peak? What are people walking toward when they abandon their equipment and disappear? Part 3 will not provide answers. The evidence does not support answers, but it will show you why the questions keep getting louder. Welcome back. This is the final part of our investigation into Mount Rainier, the mountain that has swallowed more than 400 people since 1984. If you have not seen parts 1 and 2, stop now and go back. Everything we are about to discuss depends on understanding the patterns that have already been established. In Part 1, we examined 3 disappearances. Megan Hartley, a 23-year-old hiker whose scent trail ended in the middle of an open meadow. David Okonkwo, an experienced climber who removed his crampons and ice axe at 12,000 feet and continued toward the summit with nothing that could save him. Jonathan Mercer, who walked away from his climbing partners toward a figure that appeared in his photographs, but not to the naked eye. In Part 2, we covered 2 more cases. Daniel and Emily Yoshida, a father and daughter who vanished from their tent without leaving footprints in the fresh snow that surrounded it. Marcus Webb, a park ranger who disappeared while investigating a previous disappearance, becoming part of the mystery he was trying to solve. 5 cases, 5 sets of evidence that contradict conventional explanations, 5 people who entered Mount Rainier National Park and were never seen again. The case we will examine now is different from the others. It involves multiple witnesses. It involves physical evidence that was tested by laboratories. It involves something that the witnesses saw but could not identify. After this case, we will step back and examine what all of this evidence means. We will reveal the document obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request that shows the Park Service has been tracking these unusual disappearances internally for years. We will consider the theories that have been proposed, and we will ask the questions that Mount Rainier forces us to ask. Let us continue. The Paradise area of Mount Rainier is the most visited section of the park. Located on the mountain's south side at an elevation of approximately 5,400 feet, Paradise offers accessible trails, spectacular wildflower meadows, and views of the glaciated peak that draw more than 1 million visitors annually. The Paradise Inn, built in 1916, provides lodging and dining. The Henry M. Jackson Visitor Center offers exhibits and ranger programs. During summer months, the meadows around Paradise are busy with families, day hikers, photographers, and tourists from around the world. The trails are well maintained and heavily traveled. Rangers patrol regularly. Emergency services are nearby. It is one of the safest areas in the park. Disappearances at Paradise are rare. The crowds, the infrastructure, and the relatively gentle terrain make it difficult for people to vanish unnoticed. When incidents do occur, they are typically resolved quickly. A lost child is found within hours. A disoriented hiker is located before nightfall. The resources available at Paradise make prolonged disappearances unusual. The case of the Chen family is the exception. Victor Chen was 52 years old in August of 2019. He was a surgeon at a hospital in San Jose, California, successful, respected, and devoted to his family. His wife Linda was 49, a former nurse who had left her career to raise their children. Their daughter Sophie was 21, a senior at Stanford University studying biomedical engineering. Their son Michael was 17, about to begin his senior year of high school. The Chens had visited Mount Rainier once before, in 2012, and had fallen in love with the mountain. They had talked about returning ever since. In August of 2019, they finally made it happen. A week of vacation, exploring the park, hiking the trails, reconnecting as a family before Sophie began her final year of college. They arrived on August 4th and spent 4 days exploring different areas of the park. They hiked at sunrise. They drove the Carbon River Road. They photographed wildlife and wildflowers. By all accounts, they were having a wonderful trip. On August 8th, their final full day in the park, they drove to Paradise for a day of hiking. They parked at the main lot at approximately 9:30 in the morning. They were seen by multiple witnesses throughout the day, walking the Skyline Trail, eating lunch at the picnic area, taking photographs in the meadows. At approximately 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the family was photographed by another tourist at Myrtle Falls, one of the most popular viewpoints in the Paradise area. The photograph shows all 4 Chens standing at the overlook, the waterfall behind them, smiling at the camera. Victor is wearing a green polo shirt. Linda is wearing a white blouse. Sophie is wearing a yellow sundress. Michael is wearing a blue t-shirt with a university logo. This photograph would become the last image of the Chen family. What happened next has been reconstructed from witness statements, all of which agree on the basic facts but diverge on crucial details. At approximately 4:20, a family from Oregon encountered the Chens on the trail between Myrtle Falls and the Paradise parking lot. The Oregon family, consisting of parents and 3 young children, was heading toward the falls as the Chens were returning toward the parking area. The father, a man named Robert Torres, later described the encounter. The Chens were walking in a line on the narrow trail. Victor was in front, followed by Linda, then Sophie, then Michael. They were moving at a normal pace. As the families passed each other, Robert nodded at Victor and said something about the beautiful weather. Victor nodded back but did not speak. Robert later told investigators that something about the interaction felt strange. Victor's expression was blank, not unfriendly, just absent, like he was looking through Robert rather than at him. Robert did not think much of it at the time. He continued toward the falls with his family. Approximately 10 minutes later, another witness encountered the Chens. A solo hiker named Patricia Morales was resting on a bench near the trail junction when she saw the family approaching. She noticed them because of their formation. They were walking single file, evenly spaced, at exactly the same pace. It looked almost rehearsed, she later said. Patricia watched them pass. None of them looked at her. None of them spoke to each other. They walked past the junction and continued on a path that led not toward the parking lot, but toward the Skyline Trail, heading uphill back into the meadows. Patricia thought it was odd that they were heading up the mountain so late in the day. Most visitors were returning to their cars by that hour, but she did not think to intervene. They were adults. They could make their own decisions. A third witness, a park volunteer named James Whitfield, saw the Chens approximately 15 minutes later. He was stationed at a trail junction near the Alta Vista viewpoint, answering questions and providing directions to visitors. He saw a family of 4 walking single file up the Skyline Trail. James called out to them, asking if they needed directions. The man in front, who matched Victor Chen's description, stopped walking. He turned to face James. The rest of the family stopped behind him, evenly spaced, facing the same direction. James later described the moment in detail to investigators. He said that Victor stared at him for approximately 5 seconds without speaking. His expression was neutral. His eyes seemed focused on something behind James rather than on James himself. Then Victor raised his hand and pointed. He pointed up the mountain, toward the snowfields and glaciers above the meadows. He held the gesture for a moment. Then he turned and continued walking. The rest of the family followed without a word. James watched them go. He considered following, considered insisting that they turn back. The hour was getting late. The weather could change. They did not appear to have equipment for high-altitude travel, but something stopped him. He later struggled to explain what. He said that watching them walk away, watching their synchronized movements and their silence, made him feel that interrupting would be wrong somehow. Not dangerous, just wrong. He did not follow. He returned to his duties. An hour later, when he was leaving for the day, he mentioned the encounter to a ranger at the visitor center. The ranger made a note, but took no immediate action. Solo parties heading up the mountain late were unusual, but not unheard of. When the Chens did not return to their hotel that night and did not check out the following morning, the hotel contacted the park service. Rangers found the Chen family's rental car still in the Paradise parking lot, untouched since the previous day. A search began immediately. The Skyline Trail and its surrounding area were searched that day by more than 30 personnel. Teams hiked every trail, checked every overlook, called out the family's names. Helicopters flew when weather allowed. Dogs were brought in. The dogs tracked the Chen family's scent along the route described by the witnesses, from Myrtle Falls to the trail junction, from the junction up the Skyline Trail, past Alta Vista, into the higher meadows. At approximately 7,200 feet elevation, near the edge of the Muir snowfield, the dogs stopped. The handlers described the behavior as similar to what had been observed in other Rainier disappearances. The dogs tracked to a specific point, circled, and refused to continue. They would not go uphill. They would not go downhill. They sat and whined and looked at their handlers as if confused. The point where the dogs stopped was unremarkable. Open snowfield, gently sloping upward toward Camp Muir and the upper mountain. No crevasses in the immediate area, no cliffs, no hazards, no features that would explain why a family would stop there, or why dogs would refuse to track further. But here is where the evidence became strange. At the location where the dogs stopped, searchers found footprints in the snow. 4 sets of prints, matching the shoe sizes of the Chen family members. The prints came from below, from the direction of the meadows. They led to this point. They did not continue. The snow surface was unbroken beyond this point. Fresh snowfall from the previous night provided a perfect recording medium. If the Chens had walked further up the mountain, they would have left prints. They did not. If they had returned downhill, they would have left prints beside their ascending tracks. They did not. The footprints simply stopped. 4 sets of human prints ending at the same point in the middle of a snowfield, with no continuation in any direction. Searchers examined the snow carefully. They probed for hidden crevasses. They checked for any sign that the surface might have collapsed, or that the family might have broken through into a void below. The snow was solid. There was nothing beneath it but more snow, compacted over years of accumulation. The search continued, for 16 days. More than 300 personnel participated, making it one of the largest search operations in park history. The entire upper mountain was covered. Every crevasse on every glacier was checked. Helicopters flew continuous patterns when visibility allowed. The search extended beyond the park boundaries, checking surrounding wilderness areas in case the family had somehow descended the mountain's remote flanks. The Chen family was not found. Their footprints remained visible in the snow for several days before melting, and subsequent snowfall erased them. Photographs of the prints were taken and analyzed. The analysis confirmed 4 distinct individuals walking in single file, evenly spaced, at a consistent pace. The final prints were complete, showing full shoe impressions with no signs of disturbance or struggle. The family had walked to that spot. They had stopped, and they had ceased to leave physical evidence of their existence. The investigation explored every possible explanation. Had the family walked further and their prints been erased by wind? Weather records showed light winds on the afternoon and evening of August 8th. Not enough to fill footprints before searchers arrived the following morning. Had they been picked up by a helicopter? No unauthorized helicopters were reported in the park. The noise would have attracted attention. And why would a helicopter pick up a family of 4 from a remote snowfield? Had they descended through terrain that did not record footprints? The routes down from that elevation all crossed snow or soft ground that would show evidence of passage. No such evidence was found in any direction. Had they fallen into a hidden crevasse? The area was not on a glacier. There were no crevasses. The snow was probed extensively. Nothing was below. The investigation could not explain how 4 people could walk to a specific point on a snowfield and then vanish without continuing in any direction. But there was one more piece of evidence, something that the witnesses had noticed but could not explain, something that would add another layer to an already inexplicable case. James Whitfield, the park volunteer who had seen Victor Chen point up the mountain, was interviewed multiple times. Each time, he described the same thing. Victor had pointed at something. His gesture was specific, directed, as if indicating something that he could see. James had looked where Victor pointed. He had seen nothing. Empty snow and ice rising toward the summit. But James mentioned something else. At the moment Victor pointed, James had felt a sensation he struggled to describe. A pressure, he called it. Not physical pressure. More like a tension, like something above them was looking back. He did not see anything. He did not hear anything. He just felt observed, watched, noticed. He had tried to dismiss the feeling as imagination. He had mostly succeeded. But in the days after the Chen family disappeared, the feeling returned. Every time he looked up at the mountain from paradise, he felt that same sense of attention, as if something above the snow line was aware of him. James Whitfield stopped volunteering at Mount Rainier after the search for the Chens was concluded. He told friends he could not explain why. He just could not be there anymore. The Chen family has been missing for 6 years. Their case remains officially open. Their bodies have never been recovered. Their relatives in California have made multiple trips to Mount Rainier. Victor's brother David has hiked to the location where the footprints ended. He has stood on the snowfield and looked up at the summit rising above. He has tried to understand what his brother saw that made him walk toward it. He has tried to understand how 4 people could vanish from the middle of an open snowfield without leaving any trace of where they went. He has found no answers. Sophie Chen's Stanford classmates held a memorial service for her at the beginning of the school year in 2019. They planted a tree on campus in her honor. Michael Chen's high school retired his jersey number from the soccer team, where he had been a starting player. Linda Chen's sister visits the memorial display at the Paradise Visitor Center every year on August 8th. The display includes photographs of missing persons from Mount Rainier. The Chen family's photograph is there now. 4 faces smiling at the camera. Myrtle falls behind them, hours before they walked up the mountain and never came back. What did Victor Chen see when he pointed up the mountain? Why did the family walk in synchronized silence toward the snowfield? How did their footprints end without continuing in any direction? What happened to Victor, Linda, Sophie, and Michael Chen on August 8, 2019? We do not know. We have now examined 6 disappearances from Mount Rainier. 6 cases where the evidence defies explanation. 6 families still waiting for answers that may never come. But these 6 cases are not isolated incidents. They are examples of a pattern that extends across decades and includes hundreds of people. In 2018, a researcher named David Benton filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the National Park Service. Benton was investigating patterns in national park disappearances, comparing statistics across different parks to identify anomalies. His request sought internal documents relating to missing persons cases at Mount Rainier. What he received, after months of delays and partial redactions, was a document that the Park Service had never publicly released. The document was titled Unusual Disappearance Incident Classification Guidelines and was dated February of 2009. It was 17 pages long, written for internal use by park rangers and search and rescue coordinators. The document created a classification system for disappearances at Mount Rainier. Standard disappearances were classified as Type 1. These were cases with clear explanations: falls into crevasses, hypothermia, drowning, climbing accidents. Type 1 cases were tragic but understandable. They fit conventional patterns. Type 2 disappearances were different. The document defined Type 2 incidents as disappearances involving anomalous evidence patterns inconsistent with known environmental hazards or human factors. It listed specific criteria for Type 2 classification: equipment found in locations the missing person could not reasonably have reached, scent trails ending abruptly without environmental explanation, witnesses reporting unusual behavior by the missing person prior to disappearance, missing person last seen moving toward a specific location without apparent destination or purpose, physical evidence suggesting the missing person removed essential survival equipment before disappearing, footprints or tracks ending without continuation in any direction. The document noted that Type 2 incidents should be investigated using standard protocols, but that supplementary documentation should be maintained separately from official case files. This supplementary documentation was to be forwarded to a specific office at park headquarters, rather than remaining with local ranger stations. The document also included a statistical summary. Between 1984 and 2008, the year before the document was written, Mount Rainier had recorded 67 Type 2 incidents, 67 disappearances that met the criteria for anomalous evidence patterns. This number did not appear in any public reporting. The Park Service's official statistics did not distinguish between Type 1 and Type 2 cases. The public saw only total numbers. The pattern was hidden. David Benton published his findings in a self-released report in 2019. The Park Service did not comment. No official acknowledgement of the Type 2 classification system was ever made, but the document exists. It shows that the Park Service has been aware of unusual patterns in Rainier disappearances for at least 15 years. It shows that rangers have been trained to recognize these patterns and to document them separately from standard cases. It shows that someone at park headquarters has been collecting information about incidents that do not fit conventional explanations. What have they learned from that information? What conclusions have they reached? What do they know that they have not shared with the public? We do not know. The supplementary documentation referenced in the guidelines was not released in response to Benton's FOIA request. It was classified as internal investigative material exempt from disclosure. Somewhere in park headquarters, there is a file containing detailed documentation of every Type 2 incident at Mount Rainier. Every piece of anomalous evidence, every witness statement describing unusual behavior, every search that ended without explanation. That file has never been made public. Let us now step back and consider what all of this evidence means. We have examined 6 disappearances in detail. Each case shared common elements with the others. Equipment left behind deliberately. Megan Hartley's pack beside the trail. David Okonkwo's crampons and ice axe on the glacier. The Yoshidas' boots inside their tent. Marcus Webb's pack and radio scattered through the forest. The Chens walked into the snow with nothing but the clothes they were wearing. Trails ending without explanation. The dogs that refused to continue past certain points. Footprints that stopped in the middle of open ground. scent trails that vanished in meadows and on snowfields, behavior changes before disappearance, the Chens walking in synchronized silence, Jonathan Mercer ignoring his partner's shouts, David Okonkwo removing his safety equipment. Something changed in these people before they vanished. Something made them act in ways that contradicted their training, their experience, their survival instincts, movement toward something. Victor Chen pointing up the mountain, Jonathan Mercer walking toward a figure that appeared on film, Marcus Webb following a trail that no one else could see. These people were not wandering aimlessly. They were going somewhere. They were moving toward something that we cannot identify. What could explain these patterns? The conventional explanations fail. These were not inexperienced people making predictable mistakes. These were hikers, climbers, and wilderness professionals who knew exactly what they were doing. They did not fall into obvious hazards. They did not succumb to typical dangers. Medical explanations have been proposed. Altitude sickness can cause confusion and poor judgment. Hypoxia can impair decision-making. Brain injuries or strokes can produce sudden behavioral changes. But these explanations do not fit the evidence. Altitude sickness affects people gradually, with recognizable symptoms. The witnesses described sudden changes, not gradual deterioration. And altitude sickness does not explain equipment found in impossible locations or trails that end without continuation. Psychological explanations have been proposed. Perhaps these people experienced sudden psychotic breaks or dissociative episodes. Perhaps they walked away from reality in a mental rather than physical sense. But sudden psychotic episodes in healthy adults are rare. They do not explain the consistent patterns across dozens of cases. They do not explain why dogs refuse to track past certain points. They do not explain footprints that end in the middle of open snowfields. Predator explanations have been proposed. Perhaps large animals, bears or mountain lions, are taking people and carrying them away without leaving evidence. But predator attacks leave signs: blood, disturbed vegetation, defensive wounds on equipment, drag marks. Mount Rainier has bears and mountain lions, but they do not snatch people silently and leave no trace. The evidence does not support predation. Human predator explanations have been proposed. Perhaps someone is hunting people on the mountain, abducting them and removing all evidence. But the logistics make this nearly impossible. The terrain is difficult. The witnesses are numerous. The timing windows are small. And how would a human predator explain footprints that end without continuation? How would they explain equipment found on inaccessible cliffs? The evidence does not support human predation. Some researchers have proposed explanations that venture beyond the conventional. Geographic anomalies. Perhaps certain locations on Mount Rainier contain properties that affect human consciousness or physical reality in ways we do not understand. Perhaps these locations create conditions where people perceive things that are not there or move in ways that should not be possible. This explanation has no scientific support, but it accounts for patterns that conventional explanations cannot address. It explains why disappearances cluster in specific areas. It explains why people behave consistently strangely before vanishing. It explains why evidence is found in impossible locations. Unknown entities. Perhaps something inhabits Mount Rainier that we have not documented. Something that attracts people, draws them away from safety, and takes them somewhere we cannot follow. This explanation sounds like fiction, but indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest have stories about the mountains that predate European contact by centuries. Stories about beings that live in the high places. Stories about travelers who walked into the wilderness and never returned. Stories that describe patterns remarkably similar to what modern investigators have documented. The Puyallup and Nisqually tribes, whose traditional territories include Mount Rainier, have names for the mountain that are often translated as the place where waters begin, or Great Snowy Mountain. But some elders describe other names, older names, that carry different meanings. Names that suggest the mountain is not just a geographic feature, but a presence. Something aware. Something that watches. These perspectives are not scientific evidence, but they represent observations accumulated over thousands of years by people who lived in the shadow of the mountain. They noticed patterns that modern investigators are only beginning to recognize. We are not endorsing any particular explanation. The evidence does not support conclusions. We are noting that the conventional framework does not account for what has been documented at Mount Rainier. Something is happening on that mountain that existing explanations cannot address. More than 400 people have vanished from Mount Rainier since 1984. 67 of those cases, at minimum, have been classified internally by the Park Service as involving anomalous evidence patterns. The true number is likely higher, as the classification system was not implemented until 2009. The rate of disappearance at Rainier is higher than at any comparable peak in North America. Higher than Denali, which is taller and more remote. Higher than Mount Hood, which sees similar visitor numbers. Higher than any of the other Cascade volcanoes that share Rainier's climate and terrain. Something about this mountain is different. Something about this place takes people at rates that statistics cannot explain. What is it? We do not know. No one knows. The evidence accumulates year after year, and the pattern becomes clearer, but the explanation remains hidden. The Park Service continues to search for every missing person. Rangers continue to risk their lives trying to find people who have vanished. Search dogs continue to track scents into meadows and onto snowfields where they stop and refuse to continue. The families continue to wait. Some have found closure through memorial services and legal declarations of death. Others continue to hope, to believe that their loved ones might somehow still be alive, might somehow return from wherever they went. The mountain continues to take people. Every year, new cases are added to the files. New families join the community of those who have lost someone to Mount Rainier. New evidence accumulates that does not fit conventional patterns, and the questions continue to grow louder. If you have watched all 3 parts of this investigation, you understand why these questions matter. You understand that Mount Rainier is not simply a beautiful mountain with typical dangers. You understand that something is happening there that we cannot explain. We began this investigation by noting that more than 400 people have vanished from Mount Rainier. We end it by acknowledging that we cannot tell you what happened to any of them. The evidence shows patterns, equipment left behind, trails that end impossibly, behavior changes before disappearance, movement toward something that cannot be seen. The evidence does not show causes. It does not reveal destinations. It does not explain what is taking people or where they are going. The mountain keeps its secrets. After decades of disappearances, after hundreds of searches, after countless hours of investigation, the fundamental questions remain unanswered. What is on Mount Rainier that is not on other mountains? Why does this peak claim more victims than any comparable location? What are people walking toward when they abandon their equipment and disappear? Where do they go when their trails end in the middle of empty ground? We do not know. You do not know. No one knows. But the mountain knows. Somewhere in those glaciers, those meadows, those snowfields, the answers exist. Somewhere on that peak, more than 400 people have gone. Some of them may still be there, their remains hidden in crevasses or buried under decades of snow. Others may have gone somewhere else entirely. Somewhere that the evidence suggests but cannot confirm. Somewhere beyond the trails, beyond the snowfields, beyond the boundary of what we consider possible. If you visit Mount Rainier, be aware. Know that you are entering a place with a history that the Park Service doesn't advertise. Know that people have vanished from well-traveled trails in perfect weather. Know that experience and preparation have not saved everyone. Stay on established trails. Travel with partners. Maintain regular contact with someone outside the park. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, leave. Do not investigate the strange sight. Do not walk toward the thing you cannot quite identify. Do not follow the impulse that makes no sense. The people we have examined in this investigation did not expect to become statistics. They did not expect to join the list of more than 400 missing. They were careful, experienced, prepared. They vanished anyway. You might not be able to prevent what we do not understand, but you can be aware that it exists. You can respect the mountain for what it is, not just a destination for recreation, but a place with patterns that have never been explained. Mount Rainier rises 14,411 feet above sea level. It dominates the skyline of the Pacific Northwest. On clear days, it appears beautiful and benign, a postcard image of alpine majesty. It is not benign. It has taken more than 400 people, and the evidence suggests it is not finished. Thank you for watching all 3 parts of this investigation. If you found these cases as disturbing as we do, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. We will continue examining locations with unexplained disappearance patterns. We will continue asking questions that deserve to be asked. Share this video with someone who needs to see it. Share it with someone who visits national parks. Share it with someone who trusts that popular destinations are safe simply because they are popular. The truth is more complicated. The evidence is more disturbing. And the mountain is still there, still waiting, still taking people who do not return. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on these cases. Have you visited Mount Rainier? Did you experience anything unusual? Did you feel anything that you could not explain? We read every comment. Your experience might connect to patterns we have not yet identified. Your observation might help answer questions that have remained open for decades. The investigation continues. The evidence accumulates. The families wait for answers. And Mount Rainier keeps its secrets. For now.